So every year all 7th and 8th graders will do either science fair, and then the next year all will do history. So all kids who are here 2 years, 7th and 8th, will get to do both. So if you have a 7th grader, they will be doing science fair instead of history day next year. And if you're in 8th grade, you should have done science fair last year, so you'll have had both opportunities. And it's just a chance for you to get to go in-depth with the project, pick something that you really love, and go with it. So, based on your paper that you've written, your history paper, you're going to, or should be already, creating a display board, the typical science fair 3-fold display board, and bringing that next Monday at 10 in the morning, and then you will have an oral presentation to give. And so that's what we're going to really address today, is getting ready for that, and now answer any questions. So I will go through kind of my notes to kind of explain the day for you and explain how you can prepare, and how a lot of this really is directed towards the 7th and 8th grader students, because that's how I think. I tend to speak more to students. So I'll be, even for probably a bit, talking as if we were in the classroom and I was your teacher and talking to you about preparing the speech. And then if you have any questions at any point that really need to be answered right then, feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, maybe make a note of it, and we can do question and answer and chat at the end. That would be the ideal, because that would help us to get through quicker. But if it has to be asked right then, or I'm really missing something that would benefit everybody, feel free to shoot your hand up and we'll address that. So, this is what the day is going to look like. You will be coming in at 9:45 so that we can begin at 10. And at 9:45 you'll enter downstairs by the fountain, so the double doors down there. You won't need to come in through the front office. You can just come on, we'll crack those open for you. And come on up the stairs. I'll be sitting at the top of the stairs. If you need more chairs, they're right next door. Sorry, we're probably about tapped out. Oh yeah, there's one or two in here too. So you'll come on into upstairs, check in. It'll probably be me checking you in. The student will go without the parent, unless they wouldn't really help getting into the room, but the parents will be outside of the room. There's more chairs. Feel free to grab them in the room. Come on in. And going up to the room that you're assigned, and you'll find a table just about the size of one of these desks separated. Each one will be kind of individual, and each table will hold 4 display boards, so 2 on each side. The student that you end up with next to you will actually become like your partner student. You'll get to listen to their project, and they will get to listen to your project. So when you present, and you'll just need to present one time, in your 2 to 3 minute presentation along with question and answers, you will present to one student and one teacher. The teachers will be either the MTRAC teachers or one of the ESs. Unless you randomly happen to get your own ES, it would probably be better if you didn't. You will just be with a teacher. The more objective, the better, right? So that's why I say not your own ES, who may be emotionally involved and invested just like your own parent. So it would be better, even if you realize, oh, I'm going to have my own ES, your ES may say, oh, I'm going to pass you on to somebody else. So that ES will be listening to, probably about 8 or 10 students, and you'll be one of them. And so you will get feedback from that teacher, and you'll also get some positive feedback from that student that you partner with, and then you'll get to listen to them, and you'll get to give feedback. So all of that, all students presenting, we're going to have lots of teachers here, all ESs, all MTRAC. It should take about an hour to get through all students in all upstairs in the MTRAC classrooms. Once the presentations are done, then all the students will come on out, connect with their parents, and then we'll open up all the classrooms, and from about 11 to noon, the classrooms will be opened up to do a walkthrough, preview, and see all of the other projects to help maybe inspire you for the future. That's a really great time for reflection. Any time really is a great time for reflection. What would I do different in the future if I was going to do this again? But that would certainly be an opportunity. And just to enjoy all the work and show off your work and all of that. We should have some like cookie receptions. Definitely encouraging 5th and 6th graders to come so they can start thinking in the future. So this is a time for your siblings and maybe other people besides just the 7th and 8th graders there. Okay, so that's generally an overview of how the day itself is going to work. Any questions on that? Does that all make sense? Yeah.
Will it just be one teacher, one student, or will it just be like students? this? Are there going to be like students coming from classrooms coming to see us, or is it just?
When you present, it'll just be one student, one teacher. Yeah. And then, and we'll have a few chairs around so that once you're done, you can just kind of sit and relax. There will be others going on because the teachers, there aren't enough teachers to do all students all at the same time, so they'll be making their way through the room, but like 5 or 6 teachers per room, so there'll be multiple presentations going on at the same time, just speaking loud enough to be heard by that teacher and that student. You know, you're sort of lucky in that you don't have to have that loud projecting volume like you would for a group. It's a good question, yeah.
When are the parents invited to come in?
So that's at about 11 o'clock. From 11 to 12 is a walkthrough.
Oh, so we won't even be there for the presentation?
You're not watching the presentation. That would be too many people.
Right.
We couldn't even, and plus it's a lot of pressure for the students that way. So this is really about the student getting to shine for another adult besides their main educator or you, and another student. Maybe, I mean, ideally somebody they don't even know. So if you do happen to randomly know the person, that's great, but the goal is just to have an opportunity with a peer, hear what they have to say, and the less you know them, the more objective they're going to be. So,
Is this similar to science fair where there's going to be a first place, second place?
right. That, actually, that is
okay.
on my list to talk about, but the short answer is not really.
Okay.
So, so the feedback that the teacher is going to give you and that the other student is going to give you, and just so you all know, as a student, when you're evaluating, we are looking for positive feedback there. You might get more sort of constructive type of feedback from the teacher, but the student-to-student feedback is just something really great and positive and encouraging to say to each other, and just an opportunity to encourage your peers. That feedback you'll get that day, pretty much immediately, and bring that on home with you. It's so there's not this big process of collecting them all and analyzing scores and everything and then getting them back to you. And when you're finished, at the end of the day at noon about, when we're all finished and everybody's had a chance to see them and you're ready to go home, you'll be gathering your board and taking it home. We just, maybe in the new facility they'll get to stay or something, but we really don't have room, because if the fire department came in the next day with all the students and all those boards, we would be a little bit in violation. So they will go home with you. So the way that since because you asked about the judging and the ribbons, basically there's 2 ribbons. One is just for participation, says history, and everybody who comes and participates gets a history ribbon. And then everybody has the same opportunity to earn an exemplary award or an honorable mention, and that would be by scoring, and the rubric is on the wiki for what they're going to be scored on by the teacher, and if the teacher scores it in the highest mark in every category, then they can also get an exemplary ribbon. It's not a competitive thing, like every single student can get exemplary if you're all exemplary. It's not who's better than who, it's just personal best, and if you do a personal best of an exemplary, then you get an honorable ribbon. Okay? So that may change in the future. If you have younger siblings, we may start to look a little bit more like science fair, but we recognize that you students should come on, and you can grab a chance if you want, or take a seat on the floor, wherever you're comfy, somewhere back, wherever. Is there something over there? So we really appreciate all of you students, because this is our first year, and so we recognize that we're still learning on what support do you need, what information do you need to be completely successful. We're somewhat learning from you as you go through the process, so we appreciate you going through that, but also know there's sort of a lot of forgiveness and grace extended to you, because maybe you don't have as much as you need, and we are not going to judge you as heavily as potentially in the future. So my real hope and desire is that you learn and grow a lot from this experience. That's really what's most important. And if you are struggling in that part of it, like my kid isn't learning anything because of this, please connect with your yes. But from that point forward, do your best, share with us. We want to hear if there's a way to do better. Okay? So, let's see, let me make sure I got all those points. Any questions so far then at that point? Yeah.
Do you want the actual paper displayed on the board?
It does not need to come with you that day. That's really between student, parent, and your yes or your middle school teacher to assess the paper. All of that great, and that's a great question, all of that great information for the paper should be retold in sort of a short version in your presentation. So your presentation and the wiki should walk you through this, should be pulling out, and you should be making mention of your strong thesis statement, your main points, your conclusion. You should be making mention of your primary source documents and your secondary source documents. if you're gonna wow the judges, if you say, you know, use these primary source documents and these and you use the big history words, you'll wow the judges more, and if you can prove that, and that should also be seen on your display board. On the wiki, there's a fairly clear example of what should go where on the display board. If you want to do it a little different, you have creative liberty to do that, but all of those elements should be on there. The example is so that you don't have to think too much, but if you want to think more, you can. Everything great from your paper should be displayed on the board, and the biggest, most important thing should be said in your speech, and you should be ready for questions because you wrote that whole paper and you know all that information, so that all should be clear. But nobody's going to have time that day to read that whole paper, so it isn't necessary to bring it unless you really want to bring a notebook and show it. It's also not necessarily like with science fair to bring your notebook, because we're not proving, like, here's my theories and trials. That's more your primary source documents and showing those. So, and those are part of the display board. Okay? So that kind of brings me to talking about the display board and your presentation. Kind of the big thing, and this is where it probably gets a little more about the students, what you can do to really shine. The big thing is that you've done the hard work, the research, you've learned a lot, you know your topic, you're well prepared, but then you can take it to that next level by having an amazing display board. And it really is a life skill to be able to, instead of just slap everything up there, to choose a nice color and a nice theme that sort of matches the time period that you're addressing. To measure the distance between each of your things that you mount on there, make sure they're equally spaced from side to side and top to bottom. And if you're matting them, which I would suggest that you don't just slap white paper on a whiteboard, but you mat it with some color that looks nice and you've measured around. Get some help from your parents. This isn't something you just automatically know how to do, but it is doable, and it's an opportunity to learn. That's why we're doing this. And I've heard students say that nothing prepared them as much for high school as doing this sort of thing, like a presentation board. It's the sort of the art side of learning, but it is a valuable thing in our world. We like to see things that are pleasing to the eye. So make your display board knowledgeable, full of content, but also take some time to make it look really nice. Don't have so much little cutesy things that it's a distraction, but a little bit of, it's a historical thing. If you want to crumple the papers and fray the edges or a little, safely, I always like to burn the edges or whatever. If that goes with the time period you're doing and that feels like the right thing to do, then do that if that works. Okay. So then when it comes to you, this is a day to dress up. Wear something nice. Don't go out and buy anything, but what is that best outfit that you already have in the closet? If you're going to wear, what are your cleanest, nicest tennis shoes? Not your old ones that, like at our house, those are the ones to do the yard work, and those are the ones to wear on Sunday morning to church. So wear the Sunday morning shoes. You're not going to get them dirty. You're coming here. Wear your best jeans, not the ripped, frayed jeans, but you don't need to buy new jeans. Or if you have a nice pair of slacks or a cute dress that's appropriate for a school setting, something a little bit more on the conservative, businessy side than like a party dress. But do your best and make sure your hair is nice and neat, and make sure that you're putting on your best face. It really does. Again, it makes a difference with the display board. So when it's time to speak, and I'm struggling with it today, I've actually, as I was in the classroom for a long time, I used to sew my pockets shut because hands in the pocket it doesn't look nice. So if you're going to wear something with pockets, you're going to have to be very conscious to not put your hands in your pocket, because it's way casual, and then your pants are swooping down, and it's not cool. So that's something to practice as you're practicing at home, and hopefully you practice a lot so you're very comfortable with this, keeping your hands outside of your pockets, using them in a natural and normal way, looking at, you're lucky it's not a huge audience, like I'm trying to scope the audience, you just have 2 people, but probably the thing you're going to be most likely to do is stare at the teacher. But remember, there's 2 people there, so take a moment and look at the student also. Happened to me when I was in the classroom all the time. The student would be hyper-focused on me, and I'm like, but you have a whole class of, look around, and I try to kind of look around, but kids do tend to focus on the teacher, so make sure you look at both. Eye contact. When you arrive, or when that teacher arrives to you, welcome them with a handshake. Hi, it's nice to meet you. I am John Smith, and I'm happy to speak with you today. So eye contact, a handshake, and a handshake at the end, and a thank you are important. You should know your presentation well, like I mentioned earlier. Your presentation should be like part of you by this point. I know I really talked about with the students I work with, and I think it's even mentioned in the wiki, which is something you love because you're going to be like eating, sleeping, and drinking this topic for months. And hopefully you've enjoyed that process. Hopefully you know it well. Your presentation should sort of be like that. But the information is all there. Now you just need to find a really logical and practical and informative way to share that with others. You should know your presentation well. You are welcome to bring like little 3x5 cards, nice, neat, organized little 3x5 cards, but do not rely on them, and do not write your entire speech on there. Only some keywords, and if any of you have done excellence in writing, like the keywords or 1 to 2 words that really remind you of what the whole point is, just enough to move you along, something to remind you of your thesis and what direction and order you're going, and you should only refer to those occasionally. But if you're looking like this the whole time and reading word for word, it's it's a teleprompter thing, and that's not natural, it's not cool, and that's not what we're doing. So you should be speaking it enough. The more you practice it in the mirror and to your parents, and believe me, students, whether you think it or not, your parents want to hear you say it. The only reason you're not sharing it with the parents is because you don't want to say it to them, and they're anxious to hear you give your speech, and they would love to hear you do it 10 times or 20 times. The dog would love to hear you. So get out there, practice it with your family. They'll be happy to hear it. If you don't, if you say, no, I don't need it, you're not hurting your parents, you're hurting yourself. You're not giving yourself the best opportunity to shine. So, and the best thing you can really do when and this is with papers, but when you're practicing your speech with your parents, is you start, parents and students at 7th and 8th grade level start really quickly to get sort of an uncomfortable dynamic where the parents have heard, I don't want to hear that, I don't want you to say anything to me, and it becomes a conflict because the parent's trying to help you and coach you along. So the best thing you can do is say, Mom, what could I do different? How could I do this better? Ask for the advice and the feedback, because that's going to help you, and that will open up the door for your parents to feel comfortable sharing versus, why are you always picking on me? Why are you always so mean to me? You shut the door on that and you're hurting yourself, students. So open the door to your parents so that they can share and speak to you and help you like they want to help you. Okay? So any questions so far where we're at? Is all making sense? Okay, remember when you're speaking, speak slowly and clearly. I'm terrible at this, sorry if I'm going fast. I'm really great at writing a 4-minute speech and delivering it in a minute and a half, because I know that speech and it just flies out my mouth and everybody goes, what'd you just say? So, and that's what tends to happen. It's pretty wise to err on the side of a 4-minute speech, because you're not likely to take more than 4 minutes, but you are likely to take less than 4 minutes because you forget something or you go fast in the moment. So preparing on the long side and really practicing slow articulating a natural speech pattern and not the rushed like I do. So slow and clear. Remember to smile. Everything looks better with a smile. I used to work with kindergartners, and then when they perform on stage, I'm like, mistakes don't matter as long as you're smiling. Everybody thinks you're awesome. So the other thing about a mistake, because they happen, chances are they'll happen to at least half of you. A mistake that you've prepared and you forgot something, or you did it out of order. Does the teacher really know, or the other student really know what you have prepared? They really don't. When I was taking guitar lessons, and I'm terrible at guitar, but it was fun to take lessons for a while, my guitar teacher used to say, when you make a mistake, you just keep going and pretend like that was the way it was supposed to be. The band isn't going to stop and recover with you, like if you're in a big group. So you just keep going like it never happened, smile, recover. They'll never know. The only reason somebody's going to know you made a mistake is if you go, oh my gosh, I forgot! Then that's a very clear, obvious mistake. But most of the time, they're not going to know. Don't bring any attention to yourself. At the conclusion of your presentation, be sure to ask if the teacher or the other student has any questions, and thank them, and then you're good. So a couple of a couple things to be sure to include, and refer to the wiki because this is going to help you, but be sure to include in your presentation and on your board your thesis or your main points. Mention your primary sources like I've talked about. Make sure your display board is neat, pleasing to look at. Some do nots, what not to do. Do not start with, I'm going to tell you about. Today I'm here to tell you about my research paper. The teachers already know all of that, and it sounds artificial and robotic. So instead, you've introduced yourself and then come up with a really cool hook and catcher. Do you know about, and bring them in, maybe that little mystery thing. Have you ever heard the story of, are you familiar with something to catch them and hook them in, saying, today I'm going to tell you about, does not hook anybody in. So not, my speech is about, I'm going to tell you about, none of that. And don't end with, and now I'm done, and that's the end. It's over. Like, don't end with something like that. End with a really cool, leave them something hanging. Generally, we say your thesis statement should be at the beginning, and then it should be repeated or reflected in different words at the end to make sure there's no confusion about what you just shared. In a creative way, you're telling them what you're going to tell them, then you tell it, and then you restate what you just said, just like our 5-paragraph essay days. And so don't, make sure, I love when I listen to a speaker, and I, like, it's clear. This is their point. Make sure that it's clear what was your point, without being boring, without being, this is my point. Here's my point. Let's see, don't say things like, like, yeah, like, totally. Use, so practice enough so you don't need a lot of ums and likes. Use academic language, so you're going to practice your speech and have an opportunity to brush that up, but ask your parents for help with that too. Academic language, not the ums and likes and ooh yeah and like totallys, but more formal speech. Don't speak too fast, like I talked about. Take your time. Do not put your hands in your pocket. Try not to fidget, but a little appropriate movement, especially if you're making a big point. You want to emphasize the board, and this is the exciting part. Show it in your body also. Okay? Do smile. Do have fun. Do dress nice. Do your best. Be ready for questions. Know your topic well so that you can shine to the teacher when it happens. Okay? Any questions? Oh, George, you have some questions, right? You can, oh, that chair stuff on it, sorry. Yeah.
When they're speaking, do they refer to their board a lot, or are they supposed to just know everything and not look at their bullet points?
They really should not be going to the board, except for maybe if there's like a picture on there that really makes the point. I know, I think I saw here, one of my students is doing something on the Titanic, and and if it's a visual moment, you might refer to the board. That's appropriate to, because that becomes like your visual aid. But you shouldn't be talking to your board and reading off of your board, only referring to it if it helps to emphasize the point.
Now, can they bring in a computer and set up if they've also done like a PowerPoint or an additional?
They could. I don't see any reason that you would be down for that. We're not quite. They're more there with the science fair because we're on. I don't know, like year 10 of science fair, and it's pretty well dialed in. Where even the display board has been replaced with potential opportunity to do like a digital display.
Right. She just did both.
She could.
Okay.
Yeah.
Laurie, can you repeat the question when they asked
Yeah.
it? Okay.
Sorry, that question was, could they bring in a PowerPoint with their own laptop? We're not going to be set up for a PowerPoint. They would need to bring in their own, but they could do that. We haven't gotten to the point where it replaces the display board, but someday maybe. Yeah. If anybody's really interested in the big History Day competition, which is in San Diego County at the County Board of Education down in San Diego, that then could lead into the state competition, could lead into the national competition. Google History Day, national is NHD, I think it's even within the wiki. We're just doing a little tiny fraction of that. There's a huge amount of things like PowerPoints, things like creating a website, things like group presentations. Kids are competing at that level. Very cool. We're sort of like looked at that and scaled it down to not overwhelm you all. But
I just wanted to confirm that a PowerPoint cannot replace the presentation board, but you can bring in a computer to do your presentation.
yeah, really, I'm afraid the teachers wouldn't even know what to. So the question was, could the PowerPoint replace the presentation board, or does it need to be in addition to the presentation board? It really should probably be in addition to the presentation board. Our teachers aren't even going to have, like, we haven't created a whole system for, if they do this instead, here's what to do. We're really just assuming everybody's doing a presentation board. If you want to do something additional above and beyond, you're welcome to do that. Should be fine. You're kind of going off the grid a little bit when you start to do that kind of stuff. So the other thing that I would say to you all, if you decide to go off the grid, like, I don't like that it says, I mean, you should, I think none of you did this, but we talked about early on the potential that somebody would say, I don't like the theme I don't want to stick with the theme, and you make no connection. And really, I talk to a lot of students and show them how it is possible to connect most anything to the theme. But if you don't make any connection to the theme, then no, when the teacher, it's not really a judge, but when the teacher assesses you, you're gonna get like 0 points for the theme, right, connecting to the theme. But if you're okay with that, then you're okay with that. One of my favorite college professors said, if you want an A, do this. If you want a B, do this. If you want to, so I was sort of going for high honors and getting a 4.0, and I wasn't gonna mess that up, so I knew exactly what to do. But some of my classmates were like, I'm good with the B. And they didn't have to stress out as much. And so if that's a choice you make, if you just say, we're not going to do a display board, I'm going to do a PowerPoint, realize that some of that may not match up and you're not going to get full points. That's a choice you make. So I would say do the presentation board. If that makes sense. Any other questions? You all excited? Did we address most of what you had questions about? Obviously, there were lots of questions. I'm thrilled to see so many people here. But if you have any others, please throw them out there, or I'll hang out for a bit and answer them.
What are ways to put together a good speech?
The
The talk part. I know you talked about some of the eye contact and good thesis, good end, but how to, the middle part.
right. So
Maybe some tips there.
I think the wiki has tips. Like off the top of my head, do you have any suggestions? Mrs. Thornhill's maybe more of an expert on that. And you could stop recording now. I think we got the guts of it.
Okay.